Clean.
Yeah.
Oh, Martise. Oh, Lord. We love him. Yes, we do.
Wait, there he is. There he is.
Where? Oh, there he is. Okay, cool, 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 cool. All right, y'all.
Now you have to unmute him.
I do. Is his personal assistant there with him? I know. Okay. Martise, talk to us so we can hear you.
Hey, what's going on?
All right, there we go. Let me okay, there we go. All right, the gang is all here. Maya, can you type to us so we can know that you are here as well? She's somewhere in the chat box. Okay, so Shanette's here from Cleveland. Maya's from Austin. I think everyone else may be in the other broadcasts, so she will feed those in. All right, looks like we are good to go. Martise with that fresh cut, yes.
Love, love.
It is really all love. So just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. This is going to be a fun webinar. Maya is going to carry us through our live chat, and if anyone has any questions, there should be a chat box on the right side of your screen that we will be able to see and answer questions as we go through, so don't be shy. And if you are watching the live broadcast on YouTube, please chat there and we'll still be able to get your questions. So first off, I want to start with a very, very, very warm welcome to our guests, who I will introduce in just a moment. But just a warm welcome to you all. Thank you guys for taking time out of your Monday evenings. I'm sure you've had a long day at work, so we appreciate you coming to hang out with us for a little bit. Tonight we have three really, really awesome folks who are now part of the Friends of Ebony family. So I'm really excited for them to kick off our Young Black and Giving Back Institute webinar series for February Fall 2015. If you guys, this is the first time joining a Friends of Ebony event, we are a family of about 5,000 nonprofit organizations and young Black professionals across the United States, ranging from Ohio to Texas to Charlotte, New York, DC, etc. And we're really, really excited, or I'm really excited to be able to have you all here. I started off as a blog about 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now. Really just telling my friends about giving and how important it was to me, and it grew into sort of this offline program opportunity to really engage with the folks who we engage with online. So we started in New York with a series called Defining Young Black Philanthropy, and we had a conversation about what that word meant to us as a young generation, and that just kind of snowballed to our second Defining Young Black Philanthropy event that we held in 2013 in DC. And then we were in the Washington Post and HuffPost Impact, and kind of felt like a celebrity for a minute. And then things just kind of plateaued and kind of leveled out. We host a summit every year for young Black professionals. We've had in DC and New York. It's an opportunity for about 40 or 50 young Black professionals to come together and really talk about giving and what that means to us. And so we'll be doing it again in 2016. Really excited. Can't tell all of the good news and the excitement that we have, but just trust and believe. If you can make it in 2016, if you've been in 2013, 2014, you already had a taste of it. But if the first time you make it is in 2016, I promise you it will be worth all of your sky miles. I promise. All right, so enough about us. I have been instructed by our very own Detroit City woman that I will do the introduction, so I'm going to start with her. Listen, y'all don't know. Yesterday, I was like, ooh, I don't know, y'all. It's a little rough. So I want to start first by introducing a woman who probably needs no introduction, but I was blessed with the opportunity. If any of you all are Deltas, you know how strong that bond is and how small the sisterhood circle is, even though we are over 100,000 strong. Anyway, enough about Deltas. So Chantel, she is a fellow Delta. She is also the program officer for Dallas Bases Race. And right now she is in Dallas, Texas, but she hails from Detroit, Michigan. She's a graduate of Western Michigan University, and she has her bachelor's degree in business management and her master's in adult education and training from Agrassi University in Dallas. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yes, phonics. Yes, is your friend. In her free time, she enjoys speaking to empower young adults entering the workforce. She likes swing dancing and yoga, and her favorite quote is, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." So thank you, everyone, for welcoming Chantel. Chantel, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Okay, thank you. And next, don't know what happened to Jonathan, so we are going to move right on over to Mr. Martise. Martise is like my little cousin because we share a last name, and I gotta like look out for him like he's my little cousin. So tonight, Martise, he is a rising fourth year at University of Virginia, majoring in media studies and Italian. So wait, Italian, is that buongiorno? Is that right? Is that Italian? See, we listen. I be speaking Italian though. He is from the South Side of Chicago, and will be the first in his family to graduate from a four-year university. So congratulations. So we may know Martise best. In his third year, he fell victim to excessive force by the alcohol beverage control officers near his campus. He was allotted criminal charges after the incident and endured a drawn-out legal process, which he will talk about a little bit later. And so he became a celebrity overnight, really, probably in a way that he didn't want to. But nonetheless, Martise has used that opportunity to become an advocate and a voice for not only police brutality, but for our generation in terms of what we can do to be progressive, to avoid situations like that. And if we do get into them, what can we do while we're in the midst of them? So tonight, Martise is going to talk to us about his experience and what has happened since. During his time at university, Martise has served on the executive boards of the Black Student Alliance, the Honor Committee, he's smart, y'all, the Eta Sigma chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and upon completing his graduate career, Martise hopes to begin a career in consulting while simultaneously maintaining a voice in relevant social issues. So welcome, Martise, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, yes, yes. All right, and last but not least, he has come back to join us. We're so happy to have you, Mr. Jackson. Are you there?
I am.
Okay, awesome. Jonathan is a founding team member of Blavity. For those who don't know Blavity, it almost needs no introduction, but about a year and a half ago, this website that is in its name, it is for Black millennials. It came and just blew everyone out of the water. It tells our stories our way, and we are really, really excited to have Jonathan here. He is a tech and media startup focused on increasing the voice of underrepresented millennials in mainstream media. Jonathan is passionate about access, opportunity, and showcasing narratives that are reflective of the African diaspora. So welcome, Mr. Jackson. We are so happy to have you here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
See, he's all smooth, y'all. See how he puts a little bass in his voice? This is gonna be all jokes, by the way, guys. This is all day, every day. So this will be a good time. So let's jump right in to the questions. Let's start with you, Jonathan. When we talked for the first time, you said that we operate in a decentralized leadership as a generation. Can you explain to us what you mean and talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I think the general narrative around the civil rights movement, historically as it's told back, chronicles basically Martin Luther King Jr. as sort of the leader, and people sort of fell in line. Things happened, policies were created, and then we ended up where we are. The issue with that story is that it doesn't leave room for the nuance of the other people who were actually helping and a lot of the other community-based activists and things that took place. I think when it comes to our generation, we see more of a coalition-based focus. So when people try in the media to identify certain people as leaders and say, hey, this seems like you're speaking for this group, the general pushback is no, we are a collective and we are all passionate about the same things and we all play a role. So I think the decentralization is a testament to the fact that we are the leaders that we've been looking for. So it's not like we're waiting for someone to come save us, or there's some sort of general leader that's going to come out of a certain university and they're going to be the person, the woman, and the man. I think everybody has decided to take their own form of leadership and magnify that. And I think these coalitions and these progressive movements are a testament to that.
Awesome, awesome. So, Martise, you talked a little bit about the role of younger millennials versus older millennials, and kind of joked yesterday that, you know, I'm the mama bear of the group because I'm the oldest millennial. But I do think that there is definitely a difference in our generation, because when things happen, there is sort of this older set of millennials that were kind of able to say, well, you know, I've been out of school, I've been working a while, so our perspective or the way that we may problem solve or kind of go about things is much different than someone like yourself who's still in college and still is learning life and figuring things out. So what do you think the role of younger millennials is in this sort of movement in terms of leadership, and how can we as older millennials support you all? Wait, sorry, I have to unmute you 1 second. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay, so first off, I would just say that when you think about younger millennials, that is the sort of group of people in America right now that are the most connected in terms of online presence. And so if you look at police brutality, which is one of the primary issues that we're facing as a community right now, a lot of it is a lot of the different instances and a lot of the movements that are coming about are being disseminated via social media websites and platforms. And so I think that understanding that younger millennials sort of have the most power in terms of that, and on the other hand, younger millennials are also the most affected by these issues. When you see these different instances, you're not seeing 30-year-old members of the Black community typically, or even like 40 or 50-year-olds. You typically don't see that many instances reoccurring on a consistent basis in comparison to the amount of younger people from the ages of like 12 to 25, being harmed by these instances. And so I think that we come with a special perspective by being the most victimized group of millennials in terms of these instances of police brutality, but also we have the most power in terms of our social media platforms. Now the problem sort of comes along when you think about what you said earlier in terms of older millennials and just older members of our communities in general having more of the professional accolades and sort of experience and backgrounds to speak out on these issues. And so I think that the beauty of it is if we come together and these older millennials, but also just older members of our community, sort of give younger millennials the leeway and the opportunity to contribute their voices and add a sort of younger, more relatable aspect to what these older members of our communities are doing, then we have a more powerful movement overall.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that there is a reason why younger millennials are, I guess, perhaps targeted or seem to be featured in many of these stories versus older millennials?
Yeah, there's a sort of transitional phase that any person goes through, whether you're African American, Asian, or white, where you are working to sort of discover yourself. You're not the most polished person as a 21-year-old, if you guys can remember from your experiences. And I think that plays a big part in it. So for instance, you are more likely to be out partying at a club at the age of 21, or you're more likely to be hanging out with a big group of friends, like in your neighborhood as a younger person. I think that those kind of things, combined with the fact that for Black people, at least Black men especially, we don't have the opportunity to be seen as children. Oftentimes we are adultified from the age of maybe even 13 or less. And so you think about the fact that when people see us, they see us as grown men from the beginning, and the fact that we also, as any young people in America, are not the most polished people because we're still transitioning into sort of who we are as adults and individuals. Those things combined sort of make it a bit more problematic for people who may not have experience with minority communities to sort of gauge our intentions as well as gauge the kind of people we are. And so it's easier for them to make negative assumptions and then act negatively in response to that.
Interesting. So with that, Chantel, we know Dallas, well, particularly McKinney, because of the pool incident. And so, as Martise was talking about, younger kids, and these weren't even millennials; these were children who were targeted. Had no way to defend themselves or anything. Talk about sort of what role youth, or even I guess maybe some of the young people in Dallas or in McKinney now, sort of what role do they play in what's happening currently? Oh, I have to unmute you. I thought I did. Sorry. Okay, you can talk now. Okay, now you can talk. What is happening? Chantel, are you there? I think you did. I have you unmute.
I think if she hits the unmute button,
Yeah,
she
you have
might.
to unmute yourself, Chantel.
Are we good?
Yes. See,
Hey, okay.
see, y'all, it's not me. I just want y'all to know it is
No,
not
it was
me.
the beginning though. It was you. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Okay. So to
Man, the struggle, the struggle.
bring it back. Give me some grace. Give me some grace. So to answer your question, for the I don't know what is that generation, the generation behind us, and
I guess it's Generation Z, they kind of call it.
Generation Z and
Mhm.
the millennials have played a very big role in the community organizing, especially when it came down to all forms of police brutality and McKinney. And the biggest thing that they did was just kind of showing up, and just showing up and saying, we're here for this. Our voice does matter, and it proved that we are not the post-racial generation. And so just being present to share their story, even the young boy who caught it all on camera, goes to show that he had a level of awareness to say that this is wrong, police brutality is happening, and that kind of prompted him into action of saying, let me record this to show some accountability. So I think that really says a lot on the awareness side, and he was a white young male as well. So across racial lines when it comes to showing up and being present and speaking up.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's pretty cool. I think a lot of young people are aware of what's going on and they know the difference between right and wrong. So this is to everybody. Do you think that there will ever be a face of leadership for Black millennials? This question has been asked. I mean, do we have a young Jesse Jackson? Is there Al Sharpton? What will happen, once these people die off in the next, decade or so? Who will be our generation's leader? Anyone can take that question first.
I think that what's unique about our generation is that we don't need that one charismatic leader, and that it's so open. And a lot of the organizers remain nameless, but of course we do know, D. Ray and people like that kind of step up and handle some teaching and things like that. But I don't think we need a charismatic leader. I don't think we're looking for one. But I'm open to hearing what you guys think and feel.
I would say that I'm kind of torn on the topic because in many ways we don't. Social media has become our NAACP in some instances, and so you see the relevance of those sort of actually established organizations disappearing a little bit, while they do still play a strong role in other aspects. But I ultimately think that when you think of the Black Lives Matter movement, is basically a modern day, in my perspective, a modern day civil rights movement. So when you think about that, and you think about how we need to sort of coordinate with the government to sort of make change, there are two different ways to view that. And so the first way is that the government, especially in terms of police brutality, can only change certain things that we have problems with on a local level. And so it's really ineffective to have one large leader because he may not know the intricacies of a Charlottesville, for instance, or even a Chicago, because they all have different needs and legislation that changed the way that their policing works in their smaller towns. But on the other hand, when it comes to communicating with higher ups in the government I know, for instance, I had a meeting with the White House recently, and one of the larger problems was that they're having so many different meetings with so many groups of people because they don't know which leaders to sort of reach out to, and so
Mm.
there's this sort of lack of organization in terms of people's wants and needs, and that sort of reasserts the need for local leaders and to handle this on a local level, but also it sort of deters progress for the things that we need on the federal level. So there are some changes that can be made federally, and if we had those distinct leaders to reach out to on a consistent basis that can convey those messages, that can be done more efficiently.
And Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna be a mixture of different sectors of business. I think if you were to take a cross section of, say, any of the marches that have happened in New York, you would see people that were involved in government. You'd see people in business. You'd see artists. You'd see students. And I think that, to Martise's point, you need people on the inside from a policy perspective. You need local activists. You need people with skills that are actually using those skills in the most relevant locations. So I think one of the most impactful ways that these movements have spread is through media, and you have to have people that have those skill sets. You need people with marketing and digital media know-how to actually position those messages in a way that can be consumed as quickly as possible. So I think there are a lot of leaders. I think they do go nameless because a lot of people are focused on the work, and they do get recognized. But I think of people like Michael Tubbs, who is one of the youngest ever elected officials in the government. He's actually a councilman in Stockton, California, and that's somebody who was born and raised there and decided that he's going to take his time to actually focus on doing some of that revitalization work. So I think you have a lot of examples of that. They may not get noticed, but I think that's going to change very quickly as we have more media outlets and we have more people who are pointing the lens where it needs to be. And so
Hmm.
those leaders, I think, exist. It's just a matter of um, how they're positioned and what we decide to consume from who is telling us our leaders look like and things like that.
Well, then, I guess to that point, kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit, who appoints those leaders, right? Who says that, you know, Mr. Tubbs is going to be the next leader, or who says, oh yeah, we're going to follow D. Ray, or like who gives that sort of appointment?
I think the community does. Ultimately, yes, for instance, in the past, Martin Luther King had this position in the church, and that was sort of his formal position that led him to being the leader of such a large-scale movement. But ultimately, if the people had not gotten behind that person and said that we want you to speak out for us, then it would have never mattered. And so now you see people like DeRay, you see Sean King, and these people are becoming leaders. They're verified on Twitter as like people who have these important voices and they're maintained. And so you have those people who wouldn't be where they are if the community hadn't uplifted them and said, we want you guys to speak for us and approved of what they were saying. And so ultimately, I think it comes from the community. Definitely interested in hearing what other people have to say on that.
I think it also has to do with the right timing too, and who's the first just to speak up. Who's kind of like the first responders, first on the scene, and closest to the media connection. So I think that has a lot to do with it, and people are just waiting. And that's kind of in our culture too, is that we're always looking for the leaders. So whoever just kind of just says, "All right, I'm here," you know. A lot of times it's just very organic. I
Hmm.
don't know if it's a
Hmm.
process to it.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys have both mentioned like who tells that story. So I think this next part is going to be really interesting to kind of hear what happened and sort of how the media got it. So I'm going to change things around a little bit in our conversation guide. Martise, take us back to the night of your incident. Tell us what happened, not minute by minute. I mean, I don't know if you remember that detail, but take us back to that moment. And then right after that, Jonathan, jump in and tell us how Blavity told that story and sort of what happened in the media afterwards. So yeah, Martise, take us back to that night.
Yeah, so it was the night of St. Patrick's Day. So obviously campus was very festive. Everybody wanted to hang out and go out and all that good stuff. And so I had class until from like 9 a.m. until about 5 p.m. So I was actually pretty tired. And I got out of class and my friends wanted to hang out I'm part of a couple of different groups that do good stuff around grounds, and we typically get together for social stuff also. And so I went to hang out with one of those groups of friends, and eventually we went to one of those friends' lawn room. And so the lawn is basically like the quad at the University of Virginia, except student leaders every year, 50 to 54 students out of 14,000 are chosen to live on the lawn. And so these rooms are like very prestigious, and people hang out in them, on a daily basis. And so we went by the lawn, and we were just hanging out and everything. And eventually it got laid out, and people wanted to go out, as anybody would want to do on St. Patrick's Day. And so there are these bars really close to campus, really close to the lawn actually, and there's an entire strip of them. And basically, depending on the day and the hour, you can sort of get into bars, and you kind of have to try your luck with it sometimes. And so obviously, my friends wanted to go to the bars, and so I went along. I decided to try to see if I could get into the bar tonight to hang out with my friends. And when I got to the door, before the bouncer asked for my age or anything, the bouncer was actually the owner of the pub. And so before asking for anything else, he asked for the zip code on my ID. And so the zip code of the ID that I presented him was a former zip code, because it was an ID that I had to present due to the fact that I lost my driver's license, which was my most current address. And so this ID was still valid, and it was actually my identification card, but it had a former zip code because my family moved, years before. And so I told him the zip code that I remembered, which was my most current zip code, and was different from the zip code on a former identification card. And so he actually recognized the zip code, and he said that he was from Morgan Park area in Chicago, which was another South Side Chicago neighborhood. And so we actually had a conversation about him being from Chicago, and after having that conversation, he said, you gave me the wrong zip code. I'm sorry, I can't let you in tonight. Have a good night. And we had that cordial conversation, and I walked away from the bar. On the way out from the bar, I was walking in one direction, and as I was walking in that direction, I was actually pulled from behind by someone. And so naturally, if someone yanks your arm from behind, you're gonna look back like what's going on, like who's pulling me. And so that's exactly what I did. Eventually, the person wouldn't let me go, and I realized that it was an alcoholic beverage control officer. And so that officer held onto my arm and pulled me aside toward the street. As he was pulling me aside, I heard him trying to basically accuse me of having a fake ID. And so he's trying to say I have a fake ID, and I'm trying to advocate for the fact that my ID was real. There was just a discrepancy at the door with the zip code. But before we could fully have that conversation, the second officer approached. And so while the first officer is still holding my left arm, for instance, the second officer comes up and grabs my right arm. So now both of my arms are behind my back. I have no opportunity to present my ID to the officers or advocate for myself aside from verbally. And before even getting further into the conversation, the third officer approaches. And so this third officer actually approaches from behind, and he doesn't have any more arms left to grab, obviously. And so he grabs me from behind in my like upper torso area. And with that, the three of the officers sort of clipped and slammed me head first into the pavement. The way that UVA is set up is that we have this brick pavement that's sort of rigid and very not flat. And so I ended up having a scar on my head, which is still kind of present. And it goes further back, and that's probably why I haven't cut my hair yet. But I had to get 10 stitches in the hospital. Before then, I was pinned to the ground by these three officers, knees in my back, handcuffed, and shackles were put around my legs. And the entire time, obviously, my peers are standing around and saying, Martise will never do anything wrong. This is horrible. How could you guys do this? And the only thing I can do is scream, how could this happen? I go to the University of Virginia. You guys are effing racist. And those are the first things that came to my mind. Eventually, I was taken to the hospital, and I was told that I had to get stitches. I argued and contested that for a long time because I knew that based on my financial background, had I gotten stitches and not been able to pay for it, I might not be able to finish my fourth year at the university. And so I said that I didn't want stitches. Eventually, the university agreed to pay for those stitches. I was taken to the police station after leaving the hospital. blood still pouring down my face, and I was left in jail until about 6 in the morning. Uh, Got out at about 6. My friend picked me up. I went to bed for about 2 hours and had a meeting at 10 a.m. And so I woke up and tried to go to the meeting as normal. But when I looked at my phone, I had about 500 text messages in my phone. And then I looked on social media, and my face was a national trending topic. And so that's basically how everything began.
All right. So Jonathan, tell us what you guys did and sort of how this story became what we now know it as.
Yeah. So when we heard about the story, it actually came from one of our writers. So we have a large team of contributing writers, and naturally, with a team that large, people have deep networks on college campuses. So we heard about the story, and one of the first things that we do at Blavity is to make sure we are focused on accuracy and that we're actually saying the things that did happen. So we reached out to some people that were either tangentially around or potentially knew about the situation to verify what was happening, and we tried to get an article up as quickly as possible just on the facts. And so when we do report those things, we make sure we tell people it's an ongoing conversation. So as long as we get the facts out via our actual Twitter account, we make sure that we consistently update. As Martise mentioned, by that time there actually was a hashtag, and so we were making sure that we were, one, curating those things from people who had relevant information, and also updating our article in real time. As the story continued to develop, we made sure to follow up. So as there were, in fact, rallies, we covered that. As there were conversations going on about the administration and what they were going to do, we made sure that we were providing that information. And then because of how I would say our team structures and how viscerally I think this affected a lot of people that we have who are college students, we made sure that we showed signs of solidarity with Martise. Because we're not just an outlet, we actually are a community. And so for us, it was really important that people understood that we don't just report things, that we actually believe that those are a part of our social mission and our focus. So that's generally how we approach that specifically, and those are some of the tactics we try to at least have around stories like that that are affect people physically, emotionally, and mentally too.
Mm-hmm. So, in sort of this story getting told, obviously it's our stories told by us, and for the greater audience, but how, I guess in this particular case, does the narrative get shifted from publication to publication, and if so, why or why not?
Yeah. The narratives start always with a background search.
I see Martise laughing.
Yeah, so if you think about how stories try to set up, I think it begins with a headline. So if you think about the first thing you see about a news story, generally speaking, major outlets, when it comes to instances like this, will automatically remove that person's name. So they'll say black student allegedly victimized by police. So if you think about the actual noun-verb agreement, Martise becomes black student. His actual truthful retelling becomes allegations. And then there's actually generally not a direct telling of who, in fact, the officers were. So generally the anonymity and the protection lies with the perpetrator in some respects, and not actually the victim. I think the second follow through there is background. So I didn't see this happen, but generally speaking, if this had happened similarly to how some other things, they dig into the background. So where is this alleged victim from? What are their posts? Do they have anything that looks a little suspicious? Like, have they ever gotten in trouble? Have they ever done something that appears to be a little thuggish, or something that we would see as not upstanding, that could actually decry their credibility? And so then there's sometimes op-eds, or there's breaking news about a picture or an instance that doesn't seem respectable, in which case that can be used to further distance that person from being a victim to being someone who, if they had acted a little better, they wouldn't be in this position. And so I think the spin happens very quickly and very subtly, and it begins almost always with the lack of humanity to a person and just
Mm-hmm.
describing them as either a part of a one-off instance, and so there's no continuity. It's always a separate, isolated event that takes place and that is not part of the norm.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that this subject noun agreement of black student nameless becomes different if Martise were a white student named Marvin who, was victimized in some way? Does he get a name? Or is this, you know,
I can only speak to the headlines I've seen. I think when it comes to the subject of race, I think people's backgrounds begin to play a very critical part in how we describe what happens. So I think um, in the coverage of Charleston, there was a lot of conversation about that student's upbringing and about that what he had gone through, the psychological trauma he had been through, what happened in his life, and so. I think there is a key difference in how we describe what happens to black people in this regard, a black student, and what happens when someone else perpetrates a
mm-hmm,
crime, and how they are actually given a benefit of a doubt or the opportunity to at least have their background discussed and brought to the public forum in a way that isn't a vilification. I
mm-hmm,
would say from what I've seen, and I work in Blavity, that does not happen when it comes to black students, or I think black people in general,
mm-hmm,
when they are victimized. I think the immediate response is, well, what did they do?
mm-hmm,
Were they acting the right way? Did they treat the officer with respect? It is always about them having to have done something up until the point where they push the wrong button, and
mm-hmm,
we see ourselves in this scenario. So I think,
mm-hmm.
from my opinion, yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's a key difference.
Now, Martise, did you see a difference in the way your story was told on black outlets, be it Blavity, be it Black Voices, The Root, Griot, etc., versus
Hmm.
more mainstream articles, CNN, Fox? I mean, Fox, but more mainstream outlets versus those that most of the news is curated by us. Did you see a difference in the way your story was told?
Yeah, so I think that on the mainstream outlets, just within themselves, you can see a sort of difference based on the way that the outlets sort of lean politically. But then you can also, hey, what's going on?
Wait,
But
I'm
then
sorry, y'all. Let me just let y'all know that Martise is somewhat of a celebrity. He has PR folks
I'm doing a
that
Google Hangout.
I mean, look, last night it was Mary, y'all. Tonight, I don't know who it is. So let your people know, like, we do
Yeah, I'm sorry,
apologize.
guys.
We do
We
apologize. We do
we have a
apologize.
we have an open door policy, so doors
Clear.
never locked.
Thank you all for letting Martise join us. We appreciate y'all.
They said thank you. Yeah,
The
but
shade.
basically, with the larger mainstream outlets, you can sort of see a difference in their political inclinations, and so some that were more liberal probably took the more black honor student did this, and this, and other would say the opposite. In terms of outlets like Blavity and the Root and everything, you can sort of see a very distinct difference, and I think that distinct difference is sort of the locality of the story. And so, although these are larger outlets that do broadcast to national audiences, they sort of maintain a more community oriented
Mhm,
stance. And so you could see that
mhm,
they look into the details that other people would overlook initially. And so they would say Martise Johnson was a member of this fraternity, he did this at the university, and this is what happened to him. Uh,
mhm,
while on the other hand, you'll see the national Fox News is, for instance, is saying black student presents fake ID at door,
mhm,
argues with officer,
mhm,
is slammed to the ground, and so they're very distinctly different stories, and I think that just goes back to the fact that outlets like Blavity are more community oriented and really want to get down to the depth of the story instead of trying to make a
mhm,
more headline sort of front page story.
mhm. Now, we look at we talk about community and we know that Black Twitter is a community, um, and our stories and how we tell our stories. Do you think that our stories, Martisa's story, the kids in McKinney, all the names that we've heard, Sandra Bland, do you think that these stories would have risen to the level that they have without us being on social media? And the second part to that question, do you think that it's just enough for us to be vocal on social media? Do you think that there is a power in that, or do you think that there needs to be a healthy mix of both? So that's to
I,
everybody.
I think that just statistically, African Americans use social media at a higher rate than any other race in the United States. That's like a statistic. And so thinking about that and understanding that we have sort of found a sort of social power in social media, it's become a tool that is invaluable to us, especially when we have trouble entering spaces and environments where systematically we just have not been able to enter. So we don't have as many black congressmen or congresswomen or senators. And so when we don't have those sort of positions, the only way that those white congressmen will listen to us is if you're tweeting their office every 10 seconds, and it becomes a very popular thing. So I think that as an oppressed community that has so many systemic barriers to entry in terms of getting our voices heard, social media has become that medium that allows us to have that voice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also for millennials, social media is where we get our news, and so at least for me, it's been the biggest tool for communication of, okay, I found out this happened, now what do I do? Instead of waiting on an outlet to tell you what's happening, and then it's too late and you can't actually participate. You didn't already have that direct connection. So it's definitely a big communication chain for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would take the stance that there's absolutely no way that these stories would get voiced like this without having a committed group of people on Twitter that are consistently focused on unearthing. And then also, I think it's not just about amplification. I think the beauty of Black Twitter is that they demand that people are actually telling this right stories and doing it correctly. So I think that's the other thing is Black Twitter doesn't just amplify things, they apply pressure. And I think when you think about the pressure that can come from Black Twitter and the actual damage that can come if you are not clear about what you're saying and how a brand can get obliterated or a person can have their reputation destroyed when they, go left and, talk sideways about Viola Davis, or the minute that someone says something that is not actually facts, you have to have them checked, and someone will find it and their following will be big enough, and then you will have to, in some respects, pay penance in the social media court. And if you're not built for that, then it's going to be bad for you. And I think that's the beauty of that when it comes to these stories about erasure and saying her name and making sure that there's equity and that there is not just talk of justice, but actually what does that look like in every single facet. So not just in a physical sense, but when you talk about media and the importance of words, Black Twitter, I think, holds outlets accountable now in a way that before this wasn't really possible, or we might have been late. So you might have seen it and then been like, this was a problem. Now everything's immediate, so you can actually change the narrative in real time.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think that that impacts activity offline, right? So is it like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it Black Twitter? Is it getting the story out? Is it being active online? And is there enough of the on-the-ground action? I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, Jonathan, when you said that there's a lot of things happening, but we may not hear or hear about it. For example, one of my Giving Circle members, she was telling me about all these programs happening in Baltimore that people didn't hear about or never, made it to mainstream. People may have talked about it locally. It may have been like a trending topic there, but it did end up being like this national conversation. So there still are like pockets of conversations that may happen. But in terms of letting people know what's going on, where is that opportunity to, like, if it's not a big story like Martisa's, like, are people paying attention to it? Like, how does this activity translate from this online conversation to this offline activity?
Yeah, I think there are nexus points, right? So I think in the case of McKinney, when the video came out and it was immediately broadcasted and actually brought to the forefront, I think there are groups of people that amplify, and then I think there are actually action steps. So I've seen a lot of what happens is people are like, okay, the story is out. What can we do? And then I think the key is the online component immediately turns offline. So there's always, and again, in the case of Baltimore, there were GoFundMes that started popping up. There were donation opportunities for kids that were out of school that needed supplies or needed food. And so there were actual, Amazon things you could donate to, and they would just send the stuff directly. So I do think that there is a balance. I think if you're in that area and you are in a position where you can physically be there, I think that matters. I think actually standing firm there does. And I think if you are distanced from that, that you have, in some respects, your own responsibility to amplify that message the way you can and in a relevant manner for your networks, for the people that are around you that might not know. So I think there is more of an online and offline dialogue than often gets recognized. I think it's just more apparent online because it's a lot easier to see what people are saying in the open forum than to actually be on the ground and be like, hey, I see this happening actively in Baltimore, because some people are, like I said, actually doing the work and they can't be tweeting. And so it's actually helpful to have people who are able to go and showcase what that looks like. But I think there's always need for more equity.
Cool. So let's, that's a great segue, actually. Chantel, we haven't heard much from you, so we're going to transition over to you. When we talk about what's next, like using what we have to kind of get what we want, if you will, Jonathan and Martise were talking about this on-the-ground support, and a lot of what we see, while yes, are Black millennials, many aren't Black. So can you talk to us a little bit about what this cross-racial support looks like, and sort of how that works in terms of organizing and resources, and how that's working, at least where you are anyway?
Yeah. It's been crucial here in Dallas, especially being in the South, because you do have white people that are showing up that are also saying Black Lives Matter, but they don't know what role they play in this movement. And so for us, it has been, how do you define being an ally? And really, how do you define white privilege? And how do you turn around using white privilege or using their white privilege to be an ally to go about institutional and structural change, and how their voice, they could get something across a whole lot faster than we can. So having that educational component has been huge for us. So we've really been relying on groups and organizations that this is what they do. You know, groups like Race Forward that have a national presence, and even young millennial groups that are trained to specifically talk to millennials and white young millennials to understand what this coalition looks like, and that's youngpeopleforward.org. So it's been very useful, and also too, beyond just that Black and white paradigm, but also because Hispanics and Latinos are very big in population in Texas. And so how have our experiences also impacted or intersected with their experiences? So having that collective voice, it's been very powerful and very useful.
So Martise, what about, you mentioned allyship and how important that is. Talk to us a little bit about that and what that has meant for you, and what that kind of looks like in in a broader sense.
Yeah, I when everything happened at the University of Virginia, it was very almost instantaneous that the Black community began to organize, and they came together and they had these different plans, and they had a 21-page report on what to change at the university and in Charlottesville, and so they had all of these things. And they were cohesive. But while I was participating in these different rallies and protests with the Black community, I was also a member of several different communities at the university, and I think that one thing that happened often was, like Chantel mentioned, peers of mine approaching me and saying, well, I see that they're organizing like this, meaning the Black community, but we don't really know what role we play. And so I think that I had to have several conversations regarding this topic, and oftentimes it led to the simple suggestion that you just need to play whatever role you see fit. And so oftentimes and not meaning, and I saw your facial expression, and not meaning to you can't be an Asian American leading the rally for African Americans because that serves as ineffective in terms of portrayal to the public as well as creates tensions on an internal basis in any movement. I think that it means basically help from where you are. So if you have this position where you are a blogger for the school newspaper or for your city's newspaper, you blog from your perspective and you say why this is important to you. Or if you have these resources that might be helpful to the movement, you donate those resources to the movement. And it's about understanding your position and moving forward from that position in the effort to help in whatever way you see beneficial to the group without trying to sort of organize what's already been set.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. Right before you answer, Jonathan, in just a few minutes, we're going to transition to questions. So if you guys have questions, if you can start typing them in, and Maya will also start to field some questions for us from Twitter. So you guys can start piping in your questions, and we'll answer them in just a few more of our conversation questions. So Jonathan, from a media and information perspective, how does cross-racial support work? Does it work? I mean, you guys are, a platform established in and of yourself. Like, does Huffington Post come to you and say, hey, can we get some information? Does CNN try to get information from you guys because you have more information from the street? Can that work? How does that work from a media perspective?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
As we've started to grow, we've gotten more and more, I think, on the radar of those larger outlets. And when it comes to, cross-racial, I think there's a lot of parallels and ways that things can be definitely more seamless. I think from a community standpoint, there are combined stories that need to be told, especially in a lot of these communities that have high immigrant populations, high joblessness. You'll see that from the statistics standpoint, those communities that are most effective are often Black and Latino. Naturally, there are I think there's a deep importance for there to be intersectional conversations. I think that's what gets overlooked is that if we're actually talking about injustice, that means we're talking about socioeconomics at the exact same time. And there's a story there for everyone that I think is actually sometimes easier for people to get through than simply the racial or ethnic one. And I think having that conversation in tandem with the ethnic one opens doors for that type of dialogue. From a media perspective, I think we've had outreach from larger outlets. I think for us, it's important that the story never be co-opted, and so that's our hard line. Is that if we're giving this or someone has an opportunity to run in another publication, we need to make sure that that person who has that opportunity gets the byline they deserve. That the work isn't tarnished. That it's not re-edited. That it's not, spot checked to be an easier fit for that audience. Things that we see from sometimes something that started off one way and became something else, we are vigilant about making sure that the voice is the voice. And that's why I think ownership of your own story is very important. And I think that's why we often opt to be our own voice box, because that's really important for us to make sure that our community understands that this is a place for voices to be heard, exchanged, and supported and nourished in some respects. So I think there's a give and take there, but for the most part, I think we keep it in-house for a variety of reasons.
Word. Black power. All right, so turning to like what happens when things get quiet. These stories, I mean, unfortunately there will be another one. But in the meantime, I think sometimes it can be argued that our communities can be a bit reactionary instead of proactive. So what do we do in the downtime? How can we sort of leverage the opportunity when nothing is happening, if you will, at least nothing that, becomes large news? What can we do in our communities to sort of help when something like this does happen, so that we aren't as reactionary as we sometimes can be. And I'll kick that off to Chantel, like from Dallas Faces Race, excuse me. What are some of the tools that you give to your communities to help build and then sort of move forward when quote unquote nothing is happening?
Yeah. I really try to use this time to focus on how we got here, especially for millennials, to understand what that system and structure looks like, because we didn't get that in school, you know, and we weren't part of the civil rights movement to actually see how that started from here and came down to what we're experiencing today. So we're having a lot of historical sessions to understand what structural racism looks like and how it gets to the point of police brutality. And as well as using the downtime to define justice. I think that millennials are so passionate that when we're in the heat of the moment, we're just saying we want justice, you know, but we're not very clear of what justice looks like. So that's where it comes down to pulling resources and sharing information to define what is it that we actually want to happen. Not after the fact, but how did we arrive here? Is it a matter of bias, or do you need some implicit bias training? What protocol do you have when an officer does commit this? What are your hiring practices? So just asking a lot of questions, and I think that's what we're doing right now, is that no one is necessarily a master at it, but we're asking the questions to hopefully get us to a point to where the answers start coming and probing.
So speaking of downtime, what is the sort of end of your story, Martise? What happened after that jail stay and you went back home? What happened afterwards, and sort of where are you now?
Yeah, so after everything happened, I was allotted two misdemeanor criminal charges, and those were eventually dropped. But even further down the line, after the police officers were investigated, any charges that would have been brought against them were also the government decided to not charge them also, and so it was a very ambiguous situation that sort of made people think like, well, if he didn't do anything wrong and they didn't do anything wrong, then what happened here? So the answer that the government gave, that the governor actually gave, was that after everyone reviewed the report, they found that the three officers had not violated any policy, and so that kind of ties back to the question you just asked beforehand about when things get quiet. So things technically aren't really quiet, because right now what we need to be doing is reviewing that policy and trying to figure out why physically harming a student at the university, or any person, and not being charged with anything aligns with any kind of policy. And figuring out what policy needs to be changed in order to make sure that future instances of this sort don't happen, or if they do, that some kind of policy is violated, because it makes absolutely no sense for it to not have been. And so I think a lot of this situation,
Martise, you there? All right. Hopefully he will circle back to us in a minute. Chantel, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Jonathan, you there?
I am.
They got all that partying going on in the dorm. That's what happened with Martise. That's what happened to him. He'll be right back. So talk to us a little bit, Chantel, about our skill set. I know that was something that was important to you as well, Jonathan. What is it, from your perspective, because I know you work and you train folks in this area, Chantel, about organizing and using their skill set, and then from your perspective, Jonathan, why is it so important that we, as a generation, we use our skill set, to kind of help ourselves and in this space? Excuse me.
Well, I'll start off with, when it comes to Dallas Faces Race, we actually work through our partners, and those partners happen to be nonprofit organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to skill set, it's really just me kind of doing some lack of asset mapping and figure out what is it that you need to help build your capacity to do this work on a greater cause.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's just people. And so I do a lot of connecting and just finding out, especially for millennials, what are your skills? If it is social media, if it's building a website, if it is finding out a communication plan, if it is as soon as an event happens, how do you write up a press release, and just linking them to where they can actually serve best.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm spending a lot of my time, is just serving as a connector between the organizations that are more so specializing in this area, and the people that just want to find out how they can support and how they can be an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely social media is huge. Websites need to be there. How can people give to support the cause? Those are big key factors.
Mm-hmm. 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 And Jonathan, I know this is something that you're, passionate about in terms of using our skill set. What does that mean for you, and what could that mean for others?
Yeah, I think about this a couple of different ways. I believe that there is a role for everyone to play, depending on where you sit. And so being in tech and seeing sort of how things have grown really, really fast, I believe that it's not enough for people to just think that, I missed out on this march, like I'm not doing it, I'm not doing enough. I think people need to realign their focus and say, okay, where I am, where can I have the most impact? So I think we need more black venture capitalists. We need more people who are thinking about how they can affect education policy. All of the different facets that go into making sure, like Martise said, a policy is actually not inequitable. You need people in those places. So I think a lot of it is people not opting out. I think there's an actual, and it's sad, a line of rhetoric that says, I should do this because I could see myself having a bigger impact right now, when in reality I believe the impact can be exponential, but the problem is a lot of people opt out of the things that they think there isn't a connection point. And for me, I think working on Blavity, I've realized that my love of storytelling and social media, like I used to think that would never have an impact, but now I sit back a year later and think about the community we've built, and like if I had opted out and been like, no, that's not for me, I would have been doing not just myself a disservice, but actually the community we've tried to build. And so I think when people get really clear on, their mission and their vision and the skills they have and what their life may have been telling them and what people naturally are like, hey, you're good at that, you can always connect it, but you need people to actually figure out what that space looks like for you, and then maximize your time in that space.
Absolutely. Well, guess who's... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Add something to that. I think there's an illusion that this work is only done in the streets as far as protesting and organizing, and also try to remind people that this stuff happens in boardrooms, and spaces beyond just the streets where we are. So even if you're serving in some capacity of being on the police review board, joining associations that make decisions, that's a big factor that we need to just start being present. And find out where is our voice missing, and mobilizing to make sure that one of us or our face is there.
Agreed. For sure. Guess who's back? It's the party. What is it? The lawn room. The lawn. What dorm is it that you're in? It was
the lawn.
All y'all logged in. See, that's what happens when you got all these people on the internet to the college dorm room.
They're struggling. But I'll finish what I was saying a second ago. So I think I got cut off at policy. And so oftentimes what we want to prevent from happening is we go out, we're very passionate when something happens, we protest, and then we're invited to the table, as Chantel was saying, and they say, what do you want? And then we get to the table and we're like, we don't know what the hell we want, and that's probably the worst case scenario. And so oftentimes on the downtime, what we need to be doing is plotting out exactly what we want, so that when we get to the table, we can have this entire agenda that we can present, and that goes with us being proactive, but that also goes with the understanding that oftentimes the government won't be proactive; they'll be reactive. And so, in order to make sure that them being reactive doesn't slow down the efficiency of the process too much, we have to be extremely ready so they have some sort of template to work from immediately.
Absolutely. So, this is actually our last question. Maya should be somewhere with our questions. Let me just pull that up. What are you guys' final thoughts? What are the things that have been on your mind that you want to leave our folks with? What are your final thoughts?
You know what? I was speaking with one of my mentors earlier, and there's a level
Mm-hmm.
of fatigue that comes along with this that I didn't expect. You know, of just like, oh my gosh, why are we still here 50 years later? Can things
Mm-hmm.
a level of doubt kind of comes in, especially when you see it happening over and over and over and again. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that he mentioned when I asked, can we actually change this? And he said that, Chantel, what would have happened if our ancestors had that doubt? You know,
Mm.
um, could we actually make an impact, or are things actually going to change? And that's my final thought: is the worst thing that we can do is to think that we can't do anything about this, and this is just the way things are. So that's really resonated with me.
Mm.
I'll say that my mentality comes from my perspective of being a 21-year-old college student who's also trying to be active in these different arenas, and understanding that that's something that people don't expect of me, but oftentimes because people don't expect it of me, it works as a barrier in some instances. And so for a millennial from my position who has a lot of ideas and passionate about this movement, who hasn't had the experience that I had that not happen to me, I wouldn't be speaking right now. They have extremely large barriers to entering these conversations and having an active voice where they may have some of the key solutions to a lot of the problems we're facing. And so I think that especially in the black community, there's this sense of being a caretaker. And so if you're an older black person in the black community, you want to make sure that the younger people are taken care of. You want to say, we got your back. And you want to say, you don't need to do this because we'll do it for you. I think that sometimes that can work as a positive thing for younger African Americans who need that support system because they may not be getting it from other places. But at the same time, it can work as a deterrent for larger movements. So if you're telling a younger person, hey, you don't have to worry about this yet, you're probably stopping that younger person from taking a very pivotal place in this arena. So when you think about somebody like Bree Newsom, who just had the tenacity to climb a flagpole and strip the Confederate flag down, that's those are the kind of things that young people have to offer, but they also have things to offer when you're in the boardroom. And I think that perspective is
Mm-hmm.
always one that's typically absent. And so if we can all push in our smaller communities to find formalized positions for young people where they can sit at the table and provide that liaison perspective to a community that is often ignored, that would be an extremely beneficial change to what we have going on in this sort of political arena.
Yeah, I would highlight that there is a legacy for this type of work. I think a lot of what happens is that we move pretty quickly and we're focused, but I think one of the things that is refreshing for me is to take a look at history and think about, from my perspective, the media outlets that existed when there wasn't anything. So the Baltimore African American, the Boston Guardian, the Anti-Slavery Bugle, all of these newspapers and these outlets that were, in some respect, risking their livelihood to report on things that, first of all, no one knew existed, and then hand deliver these newspapers in places where they probably weren't supposed to be. There's a legacy of that work, and so I think when you're able to put history in context and make it applicable to people who might not have heard it before, I think that's when the light bulb goes off for people to be like, man, like my ideas, like I can create something here that matters, and this isn't a bad idea. I just haven't found a place for it yet. And I think for me, that's one of the things I try to keep in mind when I am tired and I feel like what I'm saying doesn't matter, or there's someone else already said it. I think we are enough, and I think our ideas are what's helping us move forward in a time when there are a lot of opportunities for us to stay stagnant. And I think that's just something I try to keep at the forefront. As everyone is doing this type of work in different areas, um, the history, I think, is something that can't be overlooked, and I think it's important because that's what helps us sort of like chart our course for what can be.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's so funny. I was at last week, CBC, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, and I was having this conversation. This older black gentleman, he was like super black power, and he was talking about. He asked me what I did, and I was, telling him I, work in the area of diversity, and he asked a really interesting question. He said, "Why do you think these companies should care?" And I was like, "Well, because if black people aren't at the table, or young black people aren't at the table, and they're working in the community, or in these corporations, or out in Silicon Valley, we need brown people, right? Like that's the answer." That I'm like, yeah, of course we're needed. And he's like, no, like, do you realize how long these companies and these structures and these systems have been in place, and they've been doing just fine without us? And half the reason why they feel the pressure is because they have the Uncle Jesse's and the Reverend Sharptons, et cetera, in their face saying you've got to do this. But at the end of the day, if they didn't have that pressure, would they necessarily feel the need? Would they see the justification to have us there at the table, to have us a part of these conversations? So the question he left me with is one that I'm still trying to figure out, is the why. Like, why does it matter, or why should it matter to these organizations to have us at the table? Because if they've been accomplishing what they've been looking to accomplish, if they've been, meeting their bottom line and, giving away X amount of car seats to underprivileged moms, or whatever the case may be, what difference then do we make being at the table, right? So that, I think, is something that we have to kind of figure out. In the same way that your mentor asked Chantel, like, why are we constantly seeing these stories over and over and over again? Is there no consequence? Is there no, like, something's missing, I think, in the story where these things can continuously happen in different scenarios, obviously, but there be no larger consequence for people to feel like, well, if I don't do this, or if I don't have these people at the table, then something's going to happen. And I don't think that we've been able to quite answer that question. And I think when we figure that out, like what the why is, and why we have to be at these tables, why we have to be part of these media conversations for reasons that just don't benefit us, right? So having a Blavity matters to us, but if Blavity did not exist to the larger mainstream audience, who would then, who would it matter to? I guess I'm trying to say. So, so that's just something that was kind of left with me, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So I thought it would be an interesting question to kind of leave us with. Why does it matter to, the powers that be to have us part of these conversations and at the table? So I didn't mean to leave on a somber note. Jeez, guys, y'all all deep. Jonathan sitting back. Oh, good gracious. All right, so Maya is on social, and I don't see any questions coming in, but the chat, the conversation will continue on social media with the hashtag YGBG Institute. And then since this is a recorded session, the conversation will be underneath, either on Google Plus and or on the YouTube channel. So I want to thank all of our guests for joining us this evening. You guys look good. You sounded good. Martise and all his, groupies back there. Thank y'all for letting us borrow Martise for this time. We Mr. Jackson for, cleaning up, making your aesthetic come through the screen. You look great. Awesome. Chantel came on with the face beat. Yes, giving us all kinds of life. So I thank each and every one of you. I hope this is not the last time we get a chance to talk. And I'll see Chantel in 2 weeks in Dallas. Hey, girl. Hey. Sure will. Don't be jealous.
I'm looking forward.
And so I just want to say thank you guys. And of course, I have to take my photo. I can't post it because I'm on a social media fast, but I will post it later. So everybody smile and say cheese. Oh, wait, hold on. It's iPhone 5C. All right, there we go. Say cheese. All right. All right. Thank you guys so much. And hopefully we'll be able to continue this conversation. For those of you who are watching, you can catch this again. It should be uploaded in the next few hours whenever YouTube decides that it wants to go up. We'll be sharing this across social media. So please share, tell your friends to watch. And you can catch Chantel on social media at @followchantel. You can get John underscore Jackson, is that right? So I
Yep.
didn't realize it was a double underscore. He
Yeah.
had to be slick with it, and I was like tweeting this white guy for a minute. I was like, ooh, wait, this is not him. So that's at John JON underscore Jackson, and then Martise is Martise Johnson underscore. And I am at EJC, that's me, as well as Friends of Ebony, and that's Ebony with an IE. So thank you guys again. I really, really appreciate you, and you'll hear from me soon.
All right.
All right, good
Thank you.
night,
Good
everyone.
night.